Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our program today on behalf of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. We have some exciting news to share. We are in the final weeks of our countdown to the opening of the Sousa Mendes Museum, which will be inaugurated on July 19th, next month, in his home in the center of Portugal, in Cabanas de Viriato, in the northern central region of Portugal. So we will be doing our Sunday programs right up until the Sunday before then. The next day, I'm jumping on a plane and headed to Portugal. If any of you would like to join me there, please reach out. We'll make sure you get an invitation to the opening. It will be a big celebration. The president of Portugal will be there. Very exciting. Today, we have a guest that I've wanted to have on our program for a very long time, and that is Mr. Randy Schoenberg, who will be introduced by our moderator, Adam Brown. Adam and I have known each other for a number of years. Adam is an attorney, and he runs a website called Avotenu Online. Avotenu is a Jewish genealogy journal, a very important one. And Adam runs the online version. Now, a few years ago, Adam asked me to write an article about how we at the Sousa Mendes Foundation find the visa recipients, the people who were saved by our hero, Sousa Mendes. So I wrote a whole article, and we're putting the link in the chat box if anybody's interested in learning more. And it's called Sousa Mendes's List, The Search for Survivors. And I'm very grateful to Adam for giving me that opportunity, because a number of families have come forth and identified themselves to us as a result of that article. So thank you, Adam. Now I will turn the floor over to Adam Brown. Adam, take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm coming to you from Harlem in New York City. It's a beautiful day here, the East Coast. And I'm particularly pleased to be able to interact with Randy Schoenberg today, as we are friends of some 15 years, close friends, and to be able to explore with him this deeply personal film that he made, in which he plays himself for a change. And those of you who've seen it, I hope you all have, I'm sure, felt how deeply personal the experience of making that film must have been for him. So I'll give you a brief, I'll talk about things that aren't in the film, because if you watched it carefully, there's a great deal you learned about Randy, particularly his fascinating ancestry, which runs from a generation from the legal profession back to music, back to commerce. And I guess we did find a musician, a singer back in the midst of time. Randy is a native of Los Angeles. He's accomplished in academia. He went to Princeton, where he got his Bachelor of Arts in mathematics and European culture. He then attended the law school at USC, after which he became a litigator and the founder of a law firm. And he found his niche taking on cases involving looted art from Eastern Europe. And in the process, he became one of a handful of world experts on the topic. And so he's widely regarded as certainly the most prominent person, I think, in the field from among the public through the publication of Women in Gold and the making of a movie. And so for that, we're thankful, Randy, because you gave us a picture into something that none of us knew anything about. Beyond that, he's been involved in a number of other ventures. He was a prime mover and president of the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and he became the prime mover in the genealogical study of the Austria Czech Jewish populations, and through his sponsorship led to the elimination of generations of records, which we talk about in that movie. What you don't know is that it was Randy's work that made those records available to the public. At the same time, he's been a blogger, fascinating iconoclastic blog on topics relating to genealogy. And his magnum opus is the family tree that he's created on genie.com. As a genie curator, he and I have been doing that together since 2009. So that's 15 years now, where we're a handful of people who help manage a world family tree, which has millions of participants. Randy, how many we got now?
I'd have to look it up. I think it's over 160 million. Maybe it's more than that.
Profiles, and several million people who are contributors. So it's a mammoth topic, a mammoth project that we've been involved in for many, many years. And Randy's fingers are on that. And in connection with the Genie family tree, Randy was able to make that available as a resource at ANU, which is formerly the Beit Hatfutzot, adjacent to Tel Aviv University, which is now ANU, which means we in Hebrew, and it's now a major resource for research into the history and genealogy of Jewish families all over the world. But Randy has made that synergy after many years of effort between ANU and Genie. And when you go to ANU now and you read about the great luminaries of Jewish history, through Randy's work, you will now be able to see how those people are connected to you. Okay, and you will find that they are, just about everybody in Jewish history is connected to just about all of us. And that's a very important learning tool about us as people, as a people. So that's my thing on Randy. Randy and I have been on a Clubhouse application since the beginning of COVID. When we couldn't see each other anymore, we began having, with a group of others, some of whom may be on this call, a Clubhouse group where we've been discussing genealogy matters every Sunday, or Randy has been every Sunday for the last 4 years since the outbreak of COVID, and answered questions large and small. But more importantly, for answering questions that you folks may have, I'll tell you right off the bat, posted in chat is a website or a web group on Facebook called the Jewish Genealogy Portal, where you can go on and Randy and other experts will answer your questions relating to the histories of your family, or particularly resources that are available to you that these experts can point you towards. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you right now, Randy stands ready to help you. So that being said, we've covered Randy, we've covered me. I run a project similar to Randy's in which I look at the history of the Jewish population over the last 3,000 years. And I think what we have in common that I see as themes of the movie that made the movie resonate for me is a few general topics that I just want to lay out there. And before I get to my first question, which was the topics I think I'd like to explore with you today, Randy, are probably 5 things that I found that were deeply rooted in the film. One of which is the subject of memory, right? You refer to that at the very beginning of the film. I think the second thing that I get out of the movie that I want to discuss with you is the variability of time, a sense of time. I notice a number of times in the movie you shift between 470 years ago and 8 generations ago. Okay, there's that shifting of time. There's the fact that time is not immutable. Time is a relative thing, and it's based not just on the facts, but it's also based on, things like generations, things that are not quite as certain as time. I think a third theme of that film that I think we should explore is your search for truth. Okay, you like to break things down and put them back together again. Okay, a number of times you talk about that. I think there's another feature of the film, and your connection to the film is the deeply personal. Okay, there are deeply personal moments in this film, such as your meeting with your cousin in Prague decades ago, when we get to see young Randy on his first tentative steps into this world in which he connects with them through the good works of your cousin Misha. And I think an overarching theme throughout the entire film, as reflected in the soundtrack, is your commitment to music, okay, and the arts, the use of paintings, the interpretation of an artist, and science. And I think that these are all tied together. Memory, time, truth, and the personal really relate to music, okay? Because music is about time. It's very personal to people. It's a great deal about memory, and it's full of truth. So these are the themes, I think, in the movie, and I like to explore them with you. And I don't mind having people type questions into chat. We'll get to them after the first 15-minute piece. But now I'm going to launch into my first question, Randy, which is the question everybody knows, is in your world, how did you end up making a movie? How did this come to you?
Well, thanks, Adam, for the introduction. Thank you, Olivia, for the invitation to speak to everybody. And thank everybody for coming out on a Sunday, especially if you've seen the movie already, to actually hear me speak even more, because there's just a lot of Randy in that movie. I thought, didn't think anybody would want to hear more from me. But anyway, it's a nice surprise this morning here in Los Angeles. So how did the movie come about? It started out sort of a pandemic project. What happened was that second summer of the pandemic in 2021, we were able to travel again. And so I took my family to Italy to visit my aunt Nuria and my cousins Serena and Sylvia. And I'd been, of course, doing a lot of genealogy during the pandemic. There wasn't that much else to do, and had made some progress, I thought, in the family tree. And I told my cousin Serena, who, is from Venice, Italy, and born and raised and still lives there. And I said, I think I can trace our family back to Venice. Her mother, Nuria, is my father's sister, right? So we're first cousins. And I thought I could trace back through my grandfather, Arnold Schoenberg, all the way back to Venice based on some things I had seen. So I talked to Serena, I think, a number of times before about genealogy, and she was never very interested. So I didn't really expect her to be too interested, but I thought maybe she might be a little interested when I mentioned Venice. And she immediately responded by saying, oh, you should make a documentary film about that. And I sort of laughed, thinking, who would want to watch a documentary film about my family? Of course, I'm in love with my genealogy. I've been doing it for my whole life, but I never really thought anybody else would be interested. But she's not just an artist, but also a filmmaker, and had some experience making a couple of art films. And so anyway, I laughed it off a little bit. And then on the way home, we stayed in Cincinnati with my in-laws. And right before coming back home, I got a text message from an old high school friend of mine named Brad Schley, who's a film producer. And he said, Randy, what are you doing on Monday? And I said, well, we're coming back Sunday. Why? And he said, well, I need you on Monday. I'm making a film and I need you to come over to my house and help out. And so I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I don't have anything planned on the first day back after this 4-week trip that I just took. Sure, why not? I'll go over to Brad's house. So I went over, and he explained to me what the film was about. He was making a film with this director, Matthew Mashori, about a German-Jewish couple. They had both escaped from Nazi Germany and met in New York and married. The husband became a doctor, and the wife worked as a secretary on Wall Street. And they then retired out in San Diego in their 80s. And lived in a little condo in San Diego. And at one day, their neighbor had a fundraiser from Ben Gurion University in the Negev, so the Israeli university in the south of Israel, come by trying to raise money. And he met with the neighbor and asked, do you have any friends who might be interested? And they said, well, why don't you go next door to our neighbors, the Marcuses, and talk to them. So the fundraiser went there and talked to them, left a brochure, and and then left and didn't really think much of it. And the Marcuses then they had one daughter, and said, we think we want to leave our money to this Ben Gurion University. And the daughter said, that's fine, I have plenty. And they lived then to be, I think the wife was 104 years old, so it was another 15 years. And when the wife died, and suddenly Ben-Gurion University got a check for $500 million. So what had happened? This couple, while they were living in New York in the 50s, they had raised a little money, and they wanted to invest it. And the wife asked her boss, said, will you help us invest this money, this $10,000 or whatever they had raised? And he said, well, I'm retiring, so I can't really do it. But I just met this young guy from Omaha, Nebraska, who's starting up a company, and maybe you should invest with him. So they were, I think, investor 7 or 8 with Warren Buffett. And like typical German Jews, they never spent a penny. They saved it all and just let it ride for whatever, 70 years. And so when they died, it had grown to $500 million. So Ben-Gurion University decided they wanted to make a film about this couple. It's called Who Are the Marcuses? Because of course, no one who they were. All of a sudden, there was this huge donation, the largest ever. And so my friend Brad and the filmmaker Matthew Mashori were hired to make this film about them. And what had happened was they had arranged to have an expert on German Jews come and talk on the film, and the guy canceled on the Friday before the Monday they were filming. So Brad said, hey, I know someone who knows something about, he thought, German Jews. I mean, my family's Austrian, and Maria Altmann was Austrian, but for him, that was close enough. He said, well, I'll call Randy and he'll come over and fill in for this expert guy. So I went to his house and he explained the story. I said, I don't know who these people were. How am I supposed to talk about them? And he gave me a little information. I looked them up, and they came from small towns in Germany. I knew nothing about them. And so I said, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. He said, don't worry, just, give it your best shot. So I sat in a chair and they set up to film. And all of a sudden the power went out. They blew a fuse at his house. And so I had to sit there for about 45 minutes while they figured out how to get the power back on. And while I was sitting there, I was in, front of the camera with the director right there. I said, it's funny, I just got back from this trip, and my cousin Serena had this idea that we should make a documentary film about my family history. And the way Matthew Mashori tells it, he said, okay, sure, like, how far back do you go? Thinking, 1850s, 1800s, something like that. And I said, 500 years to the ghetto in Venice. And he sort of fell over. So he and Brad then continued to talk about it, and they came back to me after I, answered their questions and described the stereotypical German Jews that apparently the Marcuses actually were, because their daughter had said the exact same things about them. They were very frugal and into education and culture and charity, but that type of thing. So that worked for their film, and they thought, well, maybe we should look into this. So we had a few more meetings. This is still 2021. And then Matthew Mashori and I decided to take a scouting trip. And so I took Matthew back to Europe in the very beginning of 2022. Things were still very shut down. If you've ever been to Venice, Italy, and been to the St. Mark's, plaza there, and seen no people, just the pigeons. That's what it looks like. I mean, it's almost unheard of. But it was completely empty. And I showed him around, and he says, and I think it's true, that's when it really crystallized for him as a film, because it wasn't just going to be a story about my, sort of boring genealogy, but it was going to be a story about these amazing people that have helped me discover things about my family, these people in Europe who are saving and rescuing our history and then helping us access it. And so that was the original conception of the film. It was going to be actually sort of a Three Musketeers story with me, my cousin Serena, and my cousin Arnie on this trip. And then in the last minute, my son Joey came along. He was just finishing his senior year. And he was sort of the reluctant teen, sort of being dragged along. And as soon as Matthew saw him, he said, okay, this film is completely different. It's now going to be a father-son film. And they focused solely on Joey through the whole film, which was fine. And I think it made it into a really good film. But that's apparently how documentaries happen. You have one idea at the beginning, and then you have to sort of go with the flow and shift if something happens, and follow the story where it takes you. So then Joey came along, and he became a big part of this story. And I think it ended up being so fitting for the story, because it's about this and Adam, you mentioned it's the sort of generational transmission of memory and history from one generation to the next. And to have me go on this roots trip, discovering my past, but then also at the same time sharing it with the next generation, I think really made for a terrific film. So I hope most of you have seen it by now, but that's how it came about. And it took a while then for them to put the film together. And then we've spent all 2023 showing it, applying to and showing it at various festivals. And now in 2024, it's finally released and public. And so I'm very happy that people are finally getting a chance to see it. Adam, you're muted. I think there you are.
Yeah, I muted. Yeah, I was laughing at some of your funnier comments, and I didn't want to take over the room, you know. So that was very interesting, Randy, and actually the reaction of Joey was fascinating for many of us.
Yeah, he mirrors the audience. Like, why am I on this trip with Randy? Like, what am I doing here? Going to graveyards and all these crazy things. And, you know, over 2 hours, he comes to appreciate maybe a little bit why I do this type of stuff and maybe get something out of it for himself.
Well, we saw him flower a little bit as a person during this film, right?
Yeah.
He starts out as a sort of reluctant kid dragging a bag through the front door in Vienna, and he leaves with that spectacular outfit that reflected his aura, as he said, okay, which I thought was just beautiful. I thought his observation of the cloak of your ancestor being fit for the Met Gala was a very funny contemporary take on that story.
Joey. That's Joey, for better or worse. He's a different kid.
Now, one of the interesting things about the individuals who left, for me anyhow, who left through the sponsorship of Sousa Mendes, is that they typically left as adults. Okay. And I came from a Litvak background, and the vast majority of people who I knew who left Europe came as teenagers. So there was no real sense of loss on their part. They were just typical teenagers who couldn't wait to get out of there to somewhere better. And there was really no connection in my family to the past. And when I actually went back to Russia as a teenager, my grandmother's response was, "What do you want to go back there for?" Okay. But I was sort of touched by your sense of connection to the land. I mean, when, I've been part of the team that have watched you with some amusement collect passports for the last 10 years. And I think that you answered that rather beautifully in the film, which was, I'm simply reclaiming that which belongs to my family, right? That was denied to them. And the second observation in that note was the woman who said, "I loved Austria. I'm never going to let the Nazis take that away from me." All right. And I think that resonates.
My grandmother, she was
grandmother,
the only grandparent that I knew was my mother's mother. And she really,
I thought that was a very profound statement. And, for someone who is a progressive Democrat in this country right now, I'm not going to politicize it. It means very deeply to me, which is, as mad as I may get at this country, it's my country, and I'm not letting anybody take it. And I think everybody on both sides of the aisle feels that way about it in their own strong way, right? And so it speaks to me at this point in our history. And talk to me a little bit about that. I think it really speaks to this audience because Sousa Mendes basically was there to help grown-ups, right? Those were his primary beneficiaries. I don't think a lot of 9-year-old kids went over the Pyrenees and threw ships via Lisbon to America. Correct me if I'm wrong, Olivia, but that was my interpretation of the people who actually benefited from his sponsorship. And so the sense of loss is probably rather profound among them. What did you find, Randy, in your family when, from your parents and your grandmother and those who you've interviewed?
My parents were born in the United States. My mom was an anchor baby. Her mom was pregnant coming over on the ship from France in 1940. And my dad's parents, the Schoenbergs, left very early from Berlin. They fled immediately in 1933 and ended up in Los Angeles already by 1934. So my parents grew up as Americans. And as I mentioned, I really only had this one grandmother because my grandfathers had both died before I was born, and the other grandmother right after I was born. But that one grandmother, she had studied to be a lawyer in Vienna, which was not normal for women at that time. She's born in 1906, and she was a full-fledged adult when she had to flee. They escaped on the day after Kristallnacht in 1938. She was 32 years old, and they had to flee through Germany into France, and fortunately were able to get out of France before it became so difficult, and the people who got caught in France then had to try to go south, and many of them were saved by de Souza Mendes, so they didn't have to go that route. But when they came over, my mother's parents, they had been able actually to send all of their furniture. That was the only thing you could spend your money on in Nazi Germany, is to send things out. And about 50% of the people who tried to do that were successful. The other 50% had their furniture looted. But my grandparents escaped and were able to bring over all their furniture. And therefore, I grew up in a house that was filled with old Austrian Biedermeier furniture. And it gave our house growing up a sort of old world feel that that I must have intuited from the beginning was something of importance. And so I fell very early. I know, Adam, you did too, into the genealogy world with a school assignment where I asked my grandmother about, what can you tell me about your family? And I remember going into, she had a room in the front of her house that was always closed with curtains and had all this old furniture in it. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Great Expectations. There's the Mrs. Habersham who has that type of room with all the curtains that end up burning. But anyway, hers didn't burn. And I remember going into this room and sort of digging through the old drawers and pulling out documents and pictures of her grandparents and great grandparents and things like that. And I got the bug very, very early. And that has led me now for 50 years on this journey of discovery into my own family. And so I think, the people who were fortunate enough to bring out artifacts and had substantial memories of things, in those families, it's a little bit that yearning for the past is maybe a little stronger than what you were talking about, the people who left with nothing and arrived in the United States, let's say, without having had a lot of experiences back in the old country. So I think that's maybe the difference for me.
Yeah, well, certainly the fact that the family chose to put Schoenberg's memorial, in Vienna, and to relocate the institute, to Vienna, suggests a strong connection.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Schoenberg side, when my grandfather died in 1951, so this is before I was born, he was largely a unrecognized and forgotten figure in the U.S. and in Europe. He was sort of just starting to be rediscovered after the long Nazi period where his music was banned. So it really wasn't until after that in the later 50s that his music started spreading again. And so in 1974, at his centennial, which is 50 years ago, this year is his 150th, in 1974 in Vienna, there was enough interest that they offered to give him an honorary grave. And my father, uncle, and aunt at that time, I think they just had his ashes in an urn because they couldn't even afford a grave when he died. And they accepted that offer because it was people at least were showing interest. And it's a very, very nice grave. It's just, as I point out in the film, strange where they put it, not in the music section where they have the fake grave for Mozart, I think, and they have Schubert and the fake grave for Beethoven and things like that. But they put him up in a very prominent position, but strangely not with the music people. So I think there had to be something that went on. But it's, with Austria and people like my grandfather, you could say what you want about the Austrians, but they really love dead composers, right? So if you're alive and living there, they don't treat you very well. But when you're dead, they make chocolates and streets, and they do a whole bunch of things, fancy graves. And so my grandfather is now in that category, and he gets a lot of attention there, which is very nice.
Well, do they distinguish between Jews and non-Jews in that adoration of those who are gone?
Well, yeah, it's like any society. There's some good and some bad still in Austria, and I like to focus on the good people, of which there are plenty. And so, but I think there are plenty of people who still don't like my grandfather, even 75 years almost after he died, based on him being Jewish or too modern or a combination of the two. So I'm used to that also.
Well, I think there's a I think another theme of this film is how hard it is to do this. I mean, it wasn't like you walked in and all these books opened up for you, and all these archives opened up for you, and these cemeteries opened up for you. One of the things, one of your characteristics, Randy, is that you're a terrific colleague, and you have surrounded yourself with the best archivists in Europe, Wolf Erich and others, and you've commanded their loyalty for a decade, which and you've cultivated friends and maintained friendships throughout the field of European Jewish history and genealogy, and they've been you've been a force multiplier for anyone interested in the history of Austria.
Well, I'm so happy when I meet people who have a similar interest to mine, because it's, as I said, not so common, at least in my family, that people are interested in what I do. And so when I meet these wonderful people like Wolf Erich Eckstein or Georg Gaugusch or Julius Müller or Barbara Kintert, who's amazing, Julius or Johannes Reiss or Traute Triebel, for example. And you meet these people and they're amazing. They don't have to be doing this. They don't have to be helping people. They don't have to be even interested in this type of history. Many of them are not affected by it as I am in the recent past or even the distant past. And so to find these people that are willing to put themselves out for us is just, it's an amazing fortune that I have, fortunate feeling I have to meet them. And so of course I become very faithful to them and loyal to them, I think. And in return, they've been very helpful to me.
Okay, well, we're close to our allotted question time, but I'm going to ask a question that other people I'm sure would want to ask, so I'll just cut to it. Has there been a trajectory to the response you've gotten from the film? Did it open with a blast, or has it been had a lot of?
Well, we had
movement?
Yeah, we had the official premiere was in Woodstock, California, at the end of September, I think, last year, and then we went to Zurich, Switzerland. We had really good audiences, and at both places. And then Matthew Mashori and I went from Zurich to Israel and arrived on the afternoon of October 6th last year. And I went down and visited, had Shabbat dinner with my wife's first cousin and his wife and four daughters, two of whom were in military age, and had a beautiful dinner, went back to the hotel in Tel Aviv, checked in and slept for a few hours. And the next morning the war had started. And I was awakened by alarms and a big bang. There was actually a building about a half mile away that was destroyed in that first attack. And so obviously we didn't get to show the film the very next day. It was a pretty harrowing experience for many people in Israel. And after a short while, you sort of figure the last thing they need to do is worry about some tourist who's there. So we tried to sort of stay out of the way, but we did actually do a Zoom showing of the film on that Sunday, right after the attack, for those people who wanted a bit of a distraction. And then Matthew and I, we continued to show the film a number of different festivals, Jewish film festivals in Miami and New York, for example, and other places, also in Vienna. And then at the end of March, we went back to the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv and showed the film for 300 people there. And that was a tremendous experience and very moving for both of us to be back in Israel and show our support for the people who are there and suffering with the war that's going on. And I think the film has a little bit of unintended maybe resonance with that. While we were filming in 2022, the Ukraine war had just started. And so in the film, when you watch it, there are several people mentioning taking in refugees or worrying about wars, especially the older interviews with my Aunt Nuria, for example, or the survivor from Theresienstadt, who were interviewed saying, they didn't think that these type of things would be happening in their lifetime, and here we are again in this type of situation. So I think the film can be very meaningful for people now, because not only is it a film about 500 years of Jewish history, which necessarily includes a lot of persecutions and expulsions and wars and survival, but it's also about how we're living in the present with these times and these issues, and continuing to live our lives and also preserve our history and what's meaningful for us at the same time. So that's been a popular theme among the people who have seen the film and reviewed the film.
All right, well, thank you, Randy. I wanted to give you folks a chance to explore the shape of Randy Schoenberg's personality and interests, and I think we've seen that in spades today. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Olivia, who's going to do some housekeeping. And this is a good time for any of you who might have questions. I see a couple up here already. Any of you who have questions, you might want to type them into chat, and I will harvest them and choose some and ask Randy those questions in your behalf during this second portion. So go ahead, Olivia. Thank you.
Great. So let me tell you what we have upcoming here at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. We have 2 more programs coming up in June, and then a program coming up in July. I'm going to focus on the 2 that we have in June. So we have a program next Sunday, which is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day in advance for all you fathers out there. We have our guest of honor next week is Dr. Shulamit Reinhardt. She's out with a new book. It's called Hiding in Holland, a Resistance Memoir, and it's her telling the story of her father during World War II. Her father was a German Jew hidden in Holland, much like Anne Frank, but with a happy ending. So she's going to be there to tell her story, and so it's a Father's Day themed program. And it's a free program. We hope to have a big audience, so please tell everyone you know. Then we have on the 30th of June, the incredible story of the Ritchie boys. These were the German Jewish refugees trained at Camp Ritchie to do intelligence work and to interrogate Nazi soldiers. So we're going to show that film. We have the director of the Ritchie Boy Museum at Camp Ritchie has been turned into a museum, and we have the son of one of the original Ritchie boys. So that'll be a really terrific program you will not want to miss.
I wanted a weapon. I wanted to kill Nazis, not with a syringe.
I felt I had to get back and do what I could.
21 years old. Kid. I'm a smart kid, but I'm still a kid.
Well, that was a circus. But a good circus, fun.
And when I left, she said to me, look, I don't want you to be killed in this war. And she put a medal around my neck, which I still have.
Okay, so let's see. Now we will get to your questions. So Adam, please take it away.
Randy, a question. Are you still doing serving clients who are seeking to retrieve looted art in Europe?
No, I haven't been so much since Maria Altmann's case ended, which is in 2006. It's 18 years ago. I ramped down my practice, and as you mentioned, I helped build a Holocaust museum here in Los Angeles and doing lots of other things. So I haven't really been representing people. Occasionally, I do get asked, and I'm trying to keep abreast of new developments. There are actually 2 cases that got dismissed. I was not involved in either of them in the last month by different circuit courts. So sometimes there are still great difficulties in recovering, obviously, looted paintings, even in the United States and certainly in Europe. So there continue to be cases and issues, but I'm not working on any actively.
Okay. Are you going to show the film in Philly by any chance at the IAJ conference?
Yes, so we have, for those of you who like Jewish genealogy, there's going to be a conference, as there is every year, and this year it's in end of August in Philadelphia, and I think they're showing it twice for anybody who hasn't seen it, or even if you have seen it, it's nice actually to see it on a big screen and not just on your home computer or television. It makes a little bit of a difference. I notice it even myself when I go, now that I've seen it a number of times in different theaters. When you're watching in a theater, you see things differently. It just has a different impact. So I'm hoping people will still want to watch it in Philadelphia in August.
Okay. There's a very interesting question, which is something that Randy and I have wrestled with. When Randy and I were brought into Genie.com about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, 15 years ago, actually, we were brought in as what they called curators. And we were volunteers. And our job was to be like park rangers, is what Randy and I refer to it, where we went all over the tree looking for problems and tried to fix them. One of the problems they had was they had about 600 different inconsistent trees describing the descendants of Charlemagne. And any of you who've done work on Ancestry or one of these sites, you will notice that there are 600 different inconsistent trees relating to you. And it's because people develop their trees and they publish them on Ancestry, and no one ever bothers to fix them. And Randy's mission in life on Genie for the last 15 years has been fixing all these trees. And so the question that on chat was, those of us who are familiar with genealogy among non-Jewish folks, that Charlemagne is the great benchmark. You know, everybody wants to demonstrate that they descend from Charlemagne. And this is something that we were brought in to deal with the descendants of Rashi, right, Randy? We had all those Rashi trees. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about benchmarks?
So Adam and I are big fans of Genie.com, GENI.com, because first of all, you can use it for free if you don't need any of the extra features. And second of all, it's a collaborative tree. So it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle where everybody in the world is working on the same puzzle. So instead of having my tree and Adam's tree, it's our tree. And when you asked before how many people are now on it, it's closing in on 190 million connected profiles. So each person gets one profile. So there's only one George Washington, there's only one Charlemagne, there's only one Rashi. and so everybody is forced to work collaboratively, for better or worse, and it turns out to be for much better. So in Jewish world, and even in the non-Jewish world, it was a thing to be descended from King David, also because there were prophecies of the Messiah had to be from the house of David or a direct descendant, that type of thing. So both in Jewish and Christian worlds, there always have been attempts to trace back into the biblical genealogy and reach King David. What we've found in investigating all of these lines is that at a certain point, they turn to fiction, and in order to connect people who are known, right? So it's sometimes very difficult to go into a tree where they're going in, let's say, the 9th century AD, okay, and to know what's correct and what's not. And what you find, though, when people who are expert in each of these areas look at it, is that there'll be real people that someone has tried to sort of put someone in between, right? So there's Joseph, some famous rabbi, and then Isaac, another famous rabbi, and they put a middle generation of Shmuel or Samuel in between them to link the two of them together. And so slowly but surely, we've actually severed all of the links on these old trees, which of course upset people who want to be descended from King David. But the idea on Genie is to have an actual, accurate, defensible, provable, documented tree. And so Adam and I and other Jewish curators have gone through trimming the tree, so to speak. So there are actually no provable lines to King David. Maybe there's one or two at the moment that still need to be investigated. The hard part is finding where it turns from fact to fiction, right? Because you have to be an expert in that particular area at that particular time, and not everybody can do that. So it's easy to look at a tree and say, oh, that must be false. Much more difficult to say, okay, where is the falsehood, and remove it. So sometimes this takes time. In terms of people that everybody wants to be related to, the Maharal mentioned in the film, the rabbi in Prague in the 1500s, who I'm also descended from, it turns out. He has, I think, about 1 million descendants on Genie, so it's not anything special when someone says they're descended from the Maharal. There's the Vilna Gaon everybody wants to be descended from, and Rashi and other things like that. So there are famous rabbis that a lot of people want to be descended from. And now maybe, thanks to our film, maybe people will want to be descended from Fioretta, and we'll have people attempting to attach to her tree. There are some that I've had to sever already from that. So yeah, thanks for that question.
So I'll just mention in passing that Randy and I we've gone at this in slightly different directions. I was always interested in genetics in college. And by the way, Randy, by 1972, Arnold Schoenberg was a known quantity at the University of Michigan, okay, because my young professors delighted in talking about him in the same context as Brahms, Beethoven, and the rest. So by then he'd made it.
Sure.
Posthumously. Randy and I have been jousting over about DNA over the years. So I run a project with about 12,000 Jewish men in it. And we have found about 700 different benchmarks, if you will. We don't know their names, but we know that about 700 different men have joined the Jewish population over the last 3,000 years, whose Y chromosomes still survive. And they joined at different places. They joined at different times. Randy's Y-DNA is quite fascinating because it matches no one in the Ashkenazi world other than a few men who lived reasonably close to your ancestry, right?
Well, let me back up a little bit. So I had a friend, Susie Boyer, and she said, oh, you have to do this. My dad did this test, and you get all these cousins if you test your Y chromosome. So that's the one you get just from your father. It goes just down from father to son to father to son. So it's sort of traceable, and it follows your surname, right? But if you do this and you're Jewish, you get all these relatives who have different surnames. And so the Fishers are related to the Steiners, or related to the Horowitzes, whatever it is, they all connect. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And so I tested with the company that does this, Family Tree DNA, and I got 0 matches, 0. So not just not Jews, no anybody, okay? like my family came from outer space and just landed in on our globe. So I tested my dad, and fortunately he matched me with one mutation actually, but he was the same line. And then, but that was it. There were no other matches. And then another Schoenberg from the same town in Hungary as our Schoenberg. So same name, same town. He tested, and according to the company, we weren't related. I thought, okay, well, that could be any reason. And then they looked more closely, and he was actually on our line. He was our closest match in the whole database, but there were just too many mutations, because normally, even without any mutations at all, people get dozens of matches, identical Y DNA. And for us, it was just these Schoenbergs that seemed to be mutating all the time. And since then, there have been two other Jewish families that popped up, one from Krakow and one from Ukraine, who also match, and no other matches. You know, these Y DNA, Adam can describe it better, but it starts with, you know, A for the human who descended from apes in Africa, and then there's a mutation that becomes B and C and D, and under each one there are all these little branches. So it's a whole tree going down. So our closest matches are, if you go back, you hit someone else 3,000 years ago, and between 3,000 years ago and then the last 500 years, nothing. So Adam's conclusion from all this is that my Hungarian Jewish family, the Schoenbergs, are originally non-Ashkenaz, because basically all Ashkenazi males have, 12 different types of Y DNA, and it's only the non-Ashkenazic Jews who end up having these sort of very, very small populations. And so very likely my ancestor came from the Ottoman Empire up into Hungary, because the Ottoman Turks did a siege on Vienna. I mean, they were right there for hundreds of years. And so there were Jews that crossed over or left DNA samples, however that may be. And so it's very likely that my ancestor was an Ottoman Jew who wandered up into Hungary.
Yep, well stated. And so the answer to your question is all of you have benchmarks. I mean, if any of you did a Y-DNA test, you're welcome to join it to the Avoteno project. And if you go to Family Tree DNA and look for a surname Avoteno, or you go to jewishdna.org, you'll find us. And I can tell you exactly which pew you sit in, exactly when your ancestor is likely to have joined the Jewish population. And we have many families, if you talk about benchmarks, who demonstrably clearly come from Kohen families that have had that family tradition for 2,700 years. So we certainly have a good understanding of the history of the Jewish people. And Randy's, we also tested one of the Halfons from Italy, and they also were of Sephardic origin or non-Ashkenazi origin. So it's a very interesting field, and Randy and I cooperate, and we tease each other, and we're working hard at it. And I think I want to emphasize, there are a number of questions about this, that this is all a collaboration, that Randy and I can't do what we do without the help of everyone else in the field. Someone in the chat mentioned Stanley Diamond, who was a pioneer in the Polish Jewish community, as Randy is in the Austria Czech Jewish community. So it takes an entire community to make this work, and we stand right on the shoulders of others. Randy would be the first to admit it.
Yes.
So, and Randy, you want to make any final? I think we have another minute or two. You want to have any wrap ups? Anything you'd like to see?
Well, actually, right. So let's start with Randy. Yes, for some final thoughts.
Yep.
Absolutely, Randy. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you again for allowing everybody to watch the film. I saw there's some questions about whether there are other opportunities to watch the film. Absolutely, you can contact me and I can put you in touch with the distributors, and I'm happy to participate in other events like this. It's really a pleasure to be able to show a film like this. I think the response I've had to it was unexpected for me, that people are interested and they also find it inspirational. And the most common response is, oh, now I want to work on my own family tree, which makes me very happy, because as Adam said, this genealogy effort is really reconstructing a giant jigsaw puzzle, and we can't do it ourselves. It's just not possible. You need to have all of us working together doing it. So I hope it inspires all of you to go look into your past, to keep digging. It often takes a long, long time to get a breakthrough like I had. And if you need help, just contact me or Adam, or go to our Facebook group, the Jewish Genealogy Portal, and ask a question. We have 70,000 members there who instantly jump in and volunteer and help people with their genealogy problems. So thanks again, Olivia, and thank you, Adam, for a great conversation as usual.
Thanks,
Adam,
Randy.
go ahead.
No, thank you, Randy, and thank you, Olivia, and your team for helping us navigate today.
Good. All right. So we've reached the end of yet another fascinating hour. I wanted to thank our illustrious panelists, Adam Brown, Randy Schoenberg, and please, audience, join us again next week and come to the Ritchie Boys and in July and our programs to come. Also, a reminder, if you would like to come to Portugal for the opening of the Susan Mendes Museum on July 19th, 2024, let us know. Be well, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.